Now they have, for years you had to stick your finger, for blood sugar. But now they have these Libre devices. You can have your handheld thing and get your blood sugar. They also got an average of 3 months, which called the hemoglobin A1C. But the trend is in diabetes now to switch away from hemoglobin A1C and go to something that they call the average blood sugar. So the trend is changing. And remember, just like blood pressure, I've learned that blood sugar is an arbitrary number. Okay? Just like, remember, high blood pressure. So you have to treat your blood sugar in context with your life. So they're going to say everyone with a hemoglobin A1C of this is diabetic, or everyone such as this is pre-diabetic. Well, they're just numbers reflecting physiology. So with that said, okay, so we talked about the blood sugar being high. It's a metabolic disease, and metabolic diseases usually don't develop quickly. They develop over time because we're disrupting the way our body was made. And some of us have genetic components to it as well. But last year, there were greater than 20 million people. Now, we're talking about type 2. 20 million people diagnosed with type 2. And by mid-century in the United States, 1 in 3 will be diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. So of all of the types of diabetes, 90% is type 2, and that is potentially reversible. So when your blood sugar goes up high and you can't get sugar into cells, things start to happen, sometimes slowly. And these are the symptoms that you might be concerned about if you haven't been tested. So one of them is polyuria. That means a lot of urine. It's weird how in medicine we try to make these words complex. We should just say, you're making lots of urine. But no, we have to name it polyuria, okay? Making lots of urine. Why is that? Because the body sees all this high blood sugar in our bloodstream. It's damaging it. It tries to get it out of us. Polyuria. So you make a lot of urine. You're going to the bathroom all the time. So when you're going to the bathroom all the time, it doesn't take long for you to get dehydrated. That's our second symptom, polydyspnea. Now, I think we spelled that wrong, but that's being very thirsty. You want to drink all the time. A lot of diabetics, when they can't get sugar into the cell, and they're peeing out all of their urine, they don't have anything to give them energy. So they start breaking down the other energy sources, which is fat and protein, and they start losing weight. So because you're losing your urine, you're dehydrated, you don't get energy into your cell, of course, the next symptom is fatigue. If blood vessels have been damaged, we have blurred vision. Because of these metabolic changes, our immune system is actually damaged. Our immune system is damaged because we need good substrate to make good immune cells. And if you don't have the body working optimally, you can't feed your immune system and you have slow healing. Usually, because you're dehydrated and your neurons aren't getting the blood supply that they want, frequently you have itchy skin as well. So if you're sitting here and saying, man, I have some of those symptoms, well, you might have type 2 or even type 1 diabetes. They're both the same as far as symptoms go. So how do we make a diagnosis? How do we make the diagnosis? Well, first of all, you have to have the symptoms, okay, of diabetes. The next thing is you take a random blood sample. Random blood drawn any time of the day, and it's greater than 200, you're considered diabetic. If you have a fasting sample and it's above 100, you're considered diabetic. The World Health Organization brings that number up to 126. If you have a measurement in your body called hemoglobin A1C, and what that is you have a cell called hemoglobin, the red blood cells, and you get sugar that snaps onto it. And if greater than 6.5% of that has sugar on it, you're considered diabetic because it's a measurement of high blood sugar. And that measures it over usually about a 3-month period. So lots of doctors like the A1C because it helps over time. Now, another thing that you could do is an average blood sugar as well. So that's how we make the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. And when we talk about diabetes, there's different types of diabetes. I'm focusing on type 2 today since 90% of people are going to end up with that type. But there's also type 1 diabetes. Usually that happens in younger. And usually the etiology of that is the pancreas makes insulin. That's the hormone that takes sugar into the blood cells. So if in type 1 diabetics, there's many different mechanisms. A lot of people think there's an immune reaction that happens that attacks these special cells called the beta cells, the islets of Langerhans. They're attacked so they don't make insulin. When they don't make insulin, these younger people have symptoms very early on. They also develop, because they have to break down proteins and other things, they develop acid in the blood. And they get something called ketoacidosis. They have fruity breath. They're very, very sick. Those, unfortunately, they have to take insulin their entire life. They don't make it, they don't. If they don't take insulin, they die. A lot of type 2 diabetics also have to take insulin, okay? So there's type 1, then there's type 2. There's a new type of diabetes that's being described, and I describe that as type 1.5. You're still making insulin, but not enough. For instance, everyone, as we get older, we don't make certain hormones. Like some people run out of thyroid. You just run out, or you get an infection, run out. Some people run out of testosterone. Some people run out of estrogen. So we run out of hormones based on aging and based on our genetics. Well, some of us also have genetic history of running out of insulin as well. So if you're running out of insulin, but you still have some, you can still have, we call that type 1.5 diabetes. You also can have what we call gestational diabetes. I'm looking around in this room, and I don't think anyone's probably at risk, but that's the type of diabetes you have when you're pregnant, okay? Some people get that. Some people just have it during pregnancy, and they never have it again. But it's very concerning when we see that because that affects the metabolism of the baby as well. So we want to stay on each of the types of diabetes. But we're talking today about type 2 because so many people are going to get it. So many people in your community are going to get it. How we handle it is going to be the key. How we handle it. And some of the long-term problems of not handling it well are going undiagnosed, very similar to high blood pressure. Prolonged exposure to high blood sugar damages the blood vessels and the organs that it goes to. So we don't like prolonged exposure. So what's the problem? I'm going to back up if I can get this to work here. So the problem is that prolonged exposure hurts many of our organ systems, and it can damage the eyes. And you've heard of this concern called a retinopathy. It damages your blood vessels in the eyes. Long exposure, the endothelium, to high levels of blood sugar damages the eyes. Kidneys. In fact, 50,000 cases of kidney failure are diagnosed each year. The etiology is, again, type 2 diabetes. Diabetes destroys the blood vessels that go to the kidneys. They get damaged enough, the kidneys don't work, you go on dialysis. Feet. 75,000 lower extremity amputations every year because the blood vessels are damaged, you don't heal very well, you get necrotic toes. I see one in the hospital every month of a diabetic not paying attention to it, getting a foot infection or gangrene and having an amputation of their lower extremities. A lot of the amputations we see of toes and lower extremities are because of diabetes that's undertreated. The heart. Diabetes is associated with 75,000 deaths per year. So when a person comes to me, I always ask them, do you have diabetes? Is it being cared for well? Because the shadow of a diabetic is a heart attack. Diabetics have heart attacks at rates much higher than everyone else because that inside lining called the endothelium is damaged. And I'm glad I brought up endothelium because I brought endothelium with me. And I was on a safari recently in Africa. Just kidding. And this is from an elephant. See how big this vessel is? And this lining right here is the endothelium. And when it's damaged, remember high blood pressure can damage it, diabetes can damage it, spike protein can damage it, food can damage it. When it's damaged, it's more likely to pick up fat and clot. And that's what clogs up the different blood vessels that go to our different organs. Which vessel is damaged first has a lot of variability, but some of it's even genetically determined. But when a blood vessel's been damaged enough, the organ malfunctions. And guess what? Our treatment for that is, well, let's support the organ. But if you think about it, is this sustainable? To have all of these cases of diabetes and all of these complications and never get at the cause. So that's why I think as we have a great opportunity to help people by not only educating them, but empowering them and letting them understand that, that our real health is coming from God, and that pathway gives us the strength. But along the way, let's recognize we have problems. But sometimes, especially in my male population, they don't even pay attention to diabetes till this next complication comes up, and that's impotence. I'm impotent. And the guy goes, but I'm only 40 years old. And I go, have you ever thought about diabetes? Oh, yeah, I have diabetes. I go, well, what's your blood sugar been running? Oh, I don't check it. Are you on a medicine for it? I'm not taking a medicine. Are you doing anything about it? No, I'm not. I said, well, do you want to be impotent the rest of your life? And then all of a sudden, they get in gear. Oh, I can do something now. They're motivated, okay? Because they understand that that's a side effect they don't want to have. It also can lead to brain problems, as obvious. You don't get sugar in your brain, you don't get blood flow in your brain, the brain doesn't work as well, okay? So all of these metabolic disturbances are pretty logical what's happening, and it takes time based on how it's developing in a person's life. So type 2 diabetes is a problem. In our 12-year-old girl, it damaged her immune system at age 12. And she was a type 2. We're seeing type 2 now in their teenage years. Type 2. It's going to be a catastrophe when they get to be their 20s and 30s. So we're going to talk a little bit about what to do about it. But I wanted to let you know that we do have a problem. So why do we get diabetes? Well, in type 2 that we're talking about, one of the things it can be is the pancreas itself doesn't make enough insulin. Okay, we talked about type 1 where it doesn't make any insulin, but sometimes the pancreas doesn't make enough for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it can be like the thyroid. The pancreas has X amount and it just runs out. You have 100,000 units and you used it all up, it's gone. Sometimes it can be because of infections, certain types of autoimmune and inflammation. We've now seen people, after they've been exposed to the spike protein in COVID, having increased level of diabetes because we have this immune response. So that's one reason, the pancreas not making enough insulin. And then the other one that's probably more common in type 2 is sugar can't get into the cell. And there is a picture of sugar, and there is a picture of the receptor that's going to take it in the cell, but that receptor is being damaged. And that the sugar can't get in the cell because that cell has too much fat. Fat is causing the receptor problem. So they say, well, what's the real cause of type 2 diabetes? A University of Kentucky study, and I went to cardiology fellowship at the University of Kentucky in Lexington, and there's a professor there that is since retired by the name of Anderson. And he wanted to know what was the cause of type 2 diabetes. So he had a bunch of young, healthy guys, and he fed them a diet 80% sugar, 80% carbohydrate, candy bars and all that. And he studied them over time, and guess how many got type 2 diabetes? Just giving them lots of sugar. 0. No diabetes. So diabetes was not associated with how much sugar you took. Because remember, our bodies are mainly designed to take carbohydrate, sugar into the body. However, 65% fat, 65% calories and fat, and a great number of them develop diabetes. So he was one of the first to show that too much fat in the diet, too much fat in our bodies as well, and too much fat, depending on your genetics, can clog up these receptors. When we can't get sugar into our cells, we get type 2 diabetes. This number is going to continue to rise. And I know it's never popular to say these things because in society we always wish everything was perfect, but we have not been led down the perfect pathway. We're marketing high-fat foods. All of our restaurants have high-fat foods. Good. I admit, they taste good, don't they? You know? But they're not long-term. Prolonged exposure to large amounts of fat is causing health problems in our country. So the average American diet now consists of 40% fat. 40% fat, and yet we know that we were designed like elephants. Elephants don't get diabetes. Elephants don't have heart disease. Elephants stay pretty healthy. Well, why is that? Well, elephants eat 70 to 80% of their calories in carbohydrates, plants. They eat 10 to 20% in fat. Plants don't have much fat, and another 10 to 20% in protein. People don't realize that we are made that we don't need large amounts of fat and large amounts of protein. And yet we think we need amounts of protein. Our bodies aren't designed to handle that. And when they're not designed to handle that, if we're sort of genetically weak in a certain thing, we have these metabolic syndromes. One of them is type 2 diabetes. So one of the goals is prevention and treating type 2 diabetes is to first recognize you might have it, 2, get fat out of your body, and 3, don't beat yourself up. I see too many people that beat themselves up. Is that? It doesn't do any good. I say, pray first, get God to help you, and say, listen, help me on my path. I want to do better. Teach me how. Pick one step and go from there. Because there's no sense stressing yourself out. Then you have another problem. You're stressed to death about your health. Now you have a mental health problem. So you have to sort of keep all of this in balance. But fat is our enemy here in type 2 diabetes. And that's a French fry, lots of fat, and there's a hamburger, and there's a pizza back behind that, lots of fat. Okay, so they've given this a fancy scientific name of what's happening, and they call it the post-receptor defect. So basically, to make this simplified, is there's so much fat in the cells that it's clogging up the receptors that take insulin and glucose into the cell. So you're making enough insulin, but it can't, because these fat receptors are all clogged up with fat, they can't pull blood sugar into the cell. So the blood sugar floats around in the bloodstream, causing damage to the organ. The body says, I don't like that. I'm going to try to do what I can to help. Let me urinate it out. So you urinate a lot, and then you get real thirsty. And because you're not having energy via sugar into your cells, the body starts breaking down other sources of energy, the proteins in our body. It also breaks down fat, so you can lose weight. You develop conditions called acidosis in the body, which is not good. Your inflammation level starts going up, and things aren't going so good, and eventually you start to feel bad. And you saw in our numbers earlier that we have lots of people that aren't feeling bad. So that's what is causing this post-receptor. So what is our current approach? Okay? Of course, our approach is insulin. And insulin Insulin is the most natural way to treat diabetes because that's what our body makes. However, giving large amounts of insulin, and if the problem's fat, that might help you out in the short term, but it might not help you out in the long term. And insulin, for those of you who've taken it before, it's a growth hormone. It makes you grow, okay? And unfortunately, sometimes you get more hungry when you start to grow and you eat more. So a lot of people on insulin, their appetites really go up a lot. So that's one approach that we have is insulin. Then we have a plethora of ways, medicines. You've heard about the medicines, okay? One of the most common ones out there is called metformin. Metformin works by lowers the liver production of sugar, and the process is called gluconeogenesis. So your doctors will love to put you on metformin because it turns down sugar production at night, okay? So your morning sugars won't be as high. However, in many instances, it doesn't get at the problem. It might prolong the sugar numbers, but if it's due to fat, it might not help a long term. If it's due to losing insulin, it might not help long term, but it might buy you some time of good blood sugars to prevent end-organ damage. The problem I've seen with metformin is GI side effects, especially long term. Okay, it affects your bowel movements long term. The medicine that works the best is the long acting. So if you're on metformin, the long acting works the best. Metformin is probably the safest of the blood sugar medicines we have. It's definitely the cheapest. It's been around a long time. So a current approach is to, insulin, give you some metformin. There's another class called the sulfonylureas, and they basically work in the pancreas to make the pancreas secrete more insulin. And some names of that is glipizide, glimepiride. That might be a good way to work if your body has lots of insulin. Okay, but if you're running out of insulin, it might not be the best thing to do. Your doctor can actually measure your insulin level in your body if he wants, and that helps them guide what medicine. That medicine seems to be fairly safe. However, any of these medicines, if you get dehydrated and not eating, can make your blood sugar go too low, and that's potentially catastrophic. Other medicines that we use, and we have so many on the market now because it's such a big problem. It's a big money maker. There's a new class called the DPP4 inhibitors, and again, these are ones that work in the pancreas again, work on different receptors in the pancreas to sort of like get the pancreas to spit out a little more insulin. Okay, so it lowers the blood sugar. More insulin, lower blood sugar. Allogliptin, the linagliptin are names. They have all sorts of trade names. These newer ones are very expensive. There's almost so many, it's hard to keep track of any, but I try to stay up on these. Then there's the SGLT2 inhibitors. This one works a little different, where one worked on the liver, one worked in the pancreas. This works in the urine. It blocks receptors in the kidneys, so you actually pee out more sugar, and it keeps sugar from being absorbed as much into the bloodstream. Names of these: Jardiance. Have you heard of that one? That's an SGLT2 inhibitor. Farxiga. That's another inhibitor. These medicines also have been shown to help with people with weak hearts and heart failure. Well, why is that? Well, because it helps get sodium out of the body too. You get sodium out of the body, you lower your blood pressure, you lower your blood volume. So these are very good medicines in people with diabetes and heart disease. The negative parts: they make you go to the bathroom all the time, so you really have to hydrate yourself, and they're very expensive. Jardiance can run $600 or $700 a month. Farxiga is probably just as good. You can probably get that for $40 or $50 a month. Okay, so these are newer types of medicines that you're going to see about. And you see these commercials. I don't know if you watch TV, but you see these commercials, and these people are running around and my life's great. I'm on this, I'm on that. Most of them, I wouldn't even think they're diabetic, Come on, The medicines have pros and cons. The pros, if it brings down your blood sugar long enough, it can slow down organ damage. So that's the pro for it, especially large organ damage. And usually, the big picture is you want to keep your average blood sugar at least below 150 if you can. But it's real strange. I've been doing this for 30 years now. I'll come in and see people with blood sugar 200 and 300, and you measure it. Do you feel bad? No, I feel pretty good. Are you taking any medicines? No, I don't. It's really strange how some people can get by with this, and that 12-year-old girl couldn't. So there's a genetic component on the endothelium that we're going to learn about in time. But our current approach is, let's start with these medicines for type 2. Let's work through these. Let's see if we can bring our blood sugar, and hopefully we won't lose organ function anytime soon. But again, I don't think that's a sustainable approach. Oh boy. So there's other ones. There's other ones with the thiazolidinones, like Avandia. They increase insulin secretions. There's lots of different ones. There's the alpha-glucosidase inhibitors. Those work in the gut, and they increase the carbohydrates from getting into you as much. They slow down the absorption of sugar. Okay? So the sugar's getting in you very slow. These do affect they do affect the way you digest food. I've also find that in those medicines, like the ones that slow down absorption, you can do that yourself if you eat food correctly. You can slow down absorption. And a lot of people will try the trick of, if they eat a bad meal and they want to slow down some absorption, take some apple cider vinegar. Or if they eat some bad food, chase it with some greens. So greens can speed up your absorption in your GI tract so you don't absorb as much of the bad stuff. Now, that doesn't make sense, right? To eat bad foods and chase it with good, but I've seen that done, okay? I've seen that done to bring down this surge in blood sugar. That's what that last class of medicine does. So the problems that I see with this original approach to type 2 diabetes is that usually it doesn't address the cause. And I think that I've showed you that the cause is fat. Because no one wants to remove fat from society. We don't want to remove fat from our body. We don't want to quit eating fat because it tastes good. We'd rather take a pill and eat our fat and deal with the organ damage. So the problem I see currently, it doesn't affect the cause. All of the medicines, I don't care which one it is, it will have at least some side effect. So everything is about risk and benefits. And most of these, it's estimated that diabetes in someone that's fairly easy to take care of cost at least, without end organ damage, about $14,000 a year. $14,000 a year. So we've developed new ways of tracking your blood sugar. We see these Libres where you can watch it all the time. We're developing medicines all the time. But I'm saying today that we need to also give people the opportunity and programs to deal with the cause if they so choose. Okay? If they so choose. Remember, free will is very important. So I think everyone, if they say, listen, this is what's happening to me, I choose to do this, that's their right to do it. But they also have to be willing to accept what might happen to them over time. So in type 2 diabetes, those are the problems. So let's talk about the treatment. What should the treatment be? Well, if it's caused by fat, it only makes sense that we need to reduce fat. As little fat as you can get by and still be happy enough to live. That's why these plant-based diets are so effective in reversing type 2 diabetes. Because a plant, guess what Mr. Plant is made of? About 78% of a plant's carbohydrates, 10 to 20% of a plant's fat, 10 to 20% of a plant's protein. That's sort of what we were designed to eat at the very beginning. That's what elephants eat, and they're the healthiest, strongest animals in the world. And they do that, and they do just fine. So our world needs to find ways, if we're going to really deal with this, is fat. But fat tastes so good, right? But I tell you, once you learn to like other things, we can like other things. Like the food we had over there, that food was great. That food's great. We got to retrain our taste buds to not like fat. Fat is an addiction. It's an addiction, no doubt about it. Sodium is an addiction. The food companies know what they're doing. They know what we're doing. So treatment is reduce fat, and one of the best ways to reduce fat is to exercise. 1 hour of exercise or movement a day is worth to your body 5 units of insulin. Exercise in type 2 diabetics is the most effective treatment in lowering blood sugar outside of not bringing enough fat in your body. So if you can get to walking and doing things and cutting down fat, type 2 diabetes is potentially reversible. I say potentially because not all of us carry the same genetics. Not all of us have the same ability to eat the same foods. In certain countries, they don't have options of eating vegetables. So it varies to where you live. And then, where is the place for medicines, okay? So if you're not making insulin in your body, if you're type 1.5 and your insulin level's going low, you're going to need insulin at some point in your life. Lantus is a good type of insulin. It helps when people are losing lots of weight. It decreases weight loss. It does relieve the symptoms. There's less worry about Lantus insulin because it's a longer acting. And they're making them more safer and easier to get. Nowadays people have pumps that they use. Some people have to do that if their insulin level's so low that they're having significant symptoms. So that's when you really need insulin, is if your levels are low and you're having lots of symptoms. And if nothing else you've tried can work. But you want to do that as a last resort because it's going to make you eat more, okay? And it's a shot. No one likes to take a shot right now, but we're hoping someday it might not be that way. So I want to give you an example of a patient, okay, that came in. And this patient thought they were in good health, okay? But one day, the symptoms that this patient had was they were thirsty all the time, couldn't get enough water, just thirsty. Then they were going to the bathroom a lot. I mean, they were waking up 3 and 4 times a night to go to the bathroom. And originally, this patient says, "Oh, it's my prostate. I'm going to get my prostate looked at," okay? Wasn't the prostate, okay? And they were tired. They were tired all the time, fatigued, no energy, a little bit on the irritable side at times. And they said, they were tired, but they had a busy job, a demanding situation, so they didn't think it was a big problem, and that they're not old enough, nothing can hurt me, And of course, this was a male, okay? And, I say, man, what an idiot, Guy's having, and this was going on for months and months. The guy's walking around feeling bad, not energy, being a pain to his family, going to the bathroom all the time, no energy. Why would a person want to live like that, okay? So they looked at so finally, he goes to the doctor, and he found out his A1C was 14. 14. Remember, 6.5 is diabetes. So this person had been diabetic a while. And remember, because this is a metabolic syndrome, other parts of the metabolism change. We have symptoms of high triglycerides. Triglyceride was elevated at 250. The fasting blood sugar, 263. Cholesterol level, 203. And his doctor was smart. He measured an insulin level. Okay, 20 is a big number. 5 is on the low side. So all of a sudden, you could have given me the diagnosis without the numbers, couldn't you? Couldn't you? You said this person has diabetes. After listening to me, you say, yeah, that's got diabetes. It's a no-brainer. So the doctor says, listen, you have type 2 diabetes. How do you want to handle it? And he did some evaluation. Luckily, this person was not having end organ damage, so they caught it fairly soon, okay? No problem with the kidney, no problem with the heart, no problem with the vision, the end organs, no infections, immune system seemed pretty good. Did a little family history, and they found out that this person's grandmother died of diabetes in the 50s. And the father of this individual also had diabetes too. So diabetes was sort of a genetic thing. So he said, how do you want to handle it? So he went down the medicines, metformin, insulin, all that, talked about the pros and cons, which is a good doctor, giving you options. And then he talked about lifestyle changes, last. Well, this patient, even though he was an idiot about all these other things, he was smart enough to realize that, hey, listen, this doesn't make sense. Let me get at the cause. So this person really went on a strict exercise program, and he got serious about making sure there was no fat around at all. No fat. And came back to his doctor and did some more blood work on him. 3 months later, just 3 months, 90 days, A1C 6.3, no medicines. Fasting blood sugar 110, triglycerides 142, cholesterol 147, and look what happened to the insulin level. Nothing. It stayed the same. So this pretty much gave us the diagnosis of type 1.5, a pancreas that wasn't making enough insulin and fat that was keeping the cells from moving the blood sugar into it. So this really wasn't a pure type 2, it's sort of a 1.5. So you say, well, diet and exercise, it worked for 3 months, okay? So this fella came back to his doctor 1 year later, and you see what that is 1 year later? It says 5.1. So that's well beyond the diabetics. So it is possible to reverse type 2 diabetes, but it's not easy in the world we live in. It takes prayer and God giving you the power to do this. And the reason I really identify with this patient is because this patient was me. This is me. So I've learned to become sort of really good about understanding diabetes. And I think once you're a diabetic and understand it, I can actually have specific foods, and I can know whether it spikes me or not, because I had a Libre device. I can keep track of it. I know how much I can eat of certain things, how much. I can eat as much salad as I want, never affects my blood sugar. I can eat salad all day long. Okay, I can't eat at night. I spike if I eat at night. It seems like I store fat more at night, so I can't eat big at night, otherwise my sugar goes high. If I do choose to cheat, I chase it with apple cider vinegar and a walk if I want to be healthy. I do cheat sometimes. I'll have something that I shouldn't eat sometimes, and I do that, I say just to make myself happy, but I've learned to do it less and less over time. Okay, I realize that if I don't do these things, I will have to take medicines that don't deal with the cause. My dad, who has type 1.5, 2, was able to go without insulin until he was 82. But now at 82, he's run out, so he is on insulin. My grandmother didn't have any resources, lived in Appalachia. She passed away from, we assume, that might have been diabetes. Don't know. So type 2 diabetes is going to be an excellent way for us to witness to our communities, because many people are going to come up with this. But I tell you from firsthand experience that the key to treating type 2 diabetes, the key to treating hypertension, the key to treating any of our health problems is in our relationship with Christ. Because He gives us the power to do things one step at a time that we can't do on our own. We need supernatural power. If we could save ourselves, we wouldn't need a Savior. And yet we know everyone will not get to that place where we can do everything perfect. We all have genes. We're all going to wear out at a certain speed. But we want to do the best we can with God leading us and giving us the power. So I think that's where we start in type 2 diabetes, in any type of disease, in any type of health talk, because I think that's the big picture, as we've talked about already. So review, big picture, pray,